There are a number of sources. Typically we divide this into capital carbon, operational carbon and use carbon. Now capital carbon is associated with the production of the materials, the construction of the asset, so that could be, for example, fuel used on site as well would be included in that. Operational carbon is generally associated with the operation of the asset, so you might think of something like street lighting if you're in charge of highways, and use carbon is then associated with the use of that asset, so that could be users emitting emissions from their vehicles on that road network. So op carb, use carb, cap carb, you have different distributions for different types of infrastructure projects. The bulk of it, if you look at the industry as a whole, is use carb is the largest chunk at the moment, but on certain types of projects, particularly for example water industry, cap carb will take up a bigger share. The immediate priorities have to be energy and transport, and reducing emissions from those two sources down to near zero as swiftly as possible. Beyond that, there's another longer term challenge of reducing cap carb and all the other areas of our economy. Now the Committee on Climate Change has recommended we need to be living in a net zero emissions nation shortly after mid-century. So that means we can't afford to wait 10, 20 years to start acting on these other areas. We need to be working on those now alongside delivering those reductions in energy and transport emissions. At a global scale, yes, it can be achieved. At a project level, that's not necessarily what we're going to be aiming for. So if you're working on an individual construction project, net zero might not be the most appropriate target. The Committee on Climate Change have tried to set out a vision last month for what a net zero UK would look like. And at the moment, they estimate that so-called negative emissions technologies, that's those that take CO2 out of the atmosphere, you could get to a maximum of about 100 megatons of CO2 being taken out by those technologies in the UK. So that means if we're going to achieve a net zero nation, we need to reduce our emissions from all other sources to around 100 megatons of CO2. And that's going to require pretty drastic reductions, not just in construction, but also in areas like aviation, agriculture and so on. And at the moment, we haven't yet got a picture of how that level of reduction can be achieved. But to a large extent that's because we haven't looked at options like in construction. There's very few options of the sort we're discussing today that are included in these scenarios, and I think it's up to us to try and generate those options that can help us get down to that 100 megaton target. One of the projects that I've been involved in was an update on the low carbon route map for the built environment. Now the original route map was produced in 2013 by the Green Construction Board, and that set out a target trajectory and steps we'd need to take to deliver an 80% reduction in carbon emissions from the built environment. Shortly before Christmas last year, we produced an update report on that, and I've also been updating those figures in the interim period as well. And that shows we're behind that target trajectory. We have been reducing emissions, particularly op carb has been going down, but that's been offset by an increase in cap carb as we've built more coming out of the recession. If we're going to get back on that target trajectory, then we need more of the industry working to reduce carbon together, as it's only when we get the supply chain fully aligned and working effectively that we can deliver the scale of reduction that's required to get back on that target trajectory. Well, it's enormous. For starters, it's several gigatons. I presented an assessment, which will be available in the slides there, for the 14 biggest markets, which alone was over 4 gigatons of emissions in their supply chains. At a global scale, you're talking about this being potentially a gigaton solution if you can deliver the best practice that we're discussing here today across the construction industry in these countries. So there's a huge role for construction to play at a global scale, and the UK should be a leader on that. And there will be a huge opportunity to export this low carbon expertise and products to these markets.